Have you ever felt stuck? I remember in my first year of medical school, I was in the chemistry lab. Back in the first year, we all had to do basic sciences because not everyone did the same subject at high school. So to level us out, they had us all do the basic sciences. I was looking out this window in the lab, and I saw the sun setting behind the hospital, this really ugly hospital they tried to make look a little less brutalist by slapping these colorful squares of metal on the side of the building, which didn't work at all. It just looks like this big Minecraft block in the center of a parking lot. I saw the sun setting, and for some reason, that was the moment when I looked at myself there with the professor's voice just in the background, me looking outside at this melancholic view. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be here. And I'll never want to be here. And this is a defining moment I'll remember forever. And so far I've remembered it. And ever since then, even going back home that day on the train, I was thinking to myself, well, what do I do? If I've concluded that I don't want to be here, what's the next step? Do I try and rationalize my staying, or do I try and rationalize my leaving? Because instinctively, my response to that concrete thought was to say, well, I've got to stay. I'm not going to quit, right? So I've got to have a reason to stay. But it would be interesting to consider what would be a valid reason to leave. I had just finished what was an abbreviated gap year. I spent about 6 or 7 months in Brazil. And there was a point there where I wanted to leave. I wanted to throw in the towel on this experience because it was getting quite tough on me. And I remember messaging my parents and talking about how I wanted to leave. I think I wrote an email, so maybe I still have it. And I was saying how I was so miserable and I just wanted to come home for the sake of not being miserable anymore. And because I think the medium was email, I sort of sent it and then went about my life. And by the time I thought they perhaps read it, at that point, I had this delay on what would be a response to whatever I was feeling that sort of took away the urgency from my emotions. And even before they responded, I had sort of concluded I'm going to stay just because either way, it's not going to be ripping off the plaster, the band-aid for you Americans. It's going to be a real slow process. And I really don't have that much time left here anyway. So what really is the difference? Either way, I'm going to have to tough it out. And I suppose I had that in my mind on the train back home, thinking, what could I say to my parents that would sound reasonable for me wanting to leave, for me wanting to give up on this lifelong dream? And ultimately, whatever I could come up with, even if it is good, isn't going to come into effect anytime soon. So why don't I tough it out for a little bit? Why don't I see if this gets better? Why don't I see if my attitude changes? And I suppose that would be the point of me becoming stuck. Because it wasn't a definitive choice. It was a wait and see choice. It wasn't, this is how it's going to be, or this is how it's not going to be. It was me telling myself, let me sit here and see what happens. Let me see how things turn out. And that is the basis of understanding my wants, my motivations, and what drives me. It's a pretty bad foundation. Because you can sit and wait your whole life for things to happen to you. And it works out if you are fortunate. What about when you have to build something from the ground up? And I would say nobody ever has to do that because we all have parents. And so we have some foundation. Some of us have a less strong foundation than others, but we all have somewhere to start from. If you have zero direction whatsoever, you can at least try and be the clone of your father, and so extend his lifespan by yours. You know, if he had big plans, if he had big moving and shaking in the works, it's a pretty good deal to live a life in imitation of that. But what if it sucks? So you end up in a position where, you know, you have a decent life, you've got decent prospects, but your heart's not in it. In fact, you don't know where your heart is. What if all my wants and desires can be boiled down into consumption? And then you look at other people, you look at people that you admire, and you think, well, I would prefer to be like that. Why don't I want to be like that? You're stuck. You're waiting and seeing what's coming down the pipeline, but you're not doing any moving and shaking of your own. In my last video, I talked about sacrifice. Those things that fill up that limited volume that is your heart space need to be purged out to such a degree that you start to have the energy to move towards something else. But being stuck, you may not even notice what those things are. You start to look around for something to sacrifice, and the list can get pretty short. What do I want, really? I do hold that you'll know once you've trimmed down the things that you want as a whole. You'll know what is more valuable to you. And I think that was my biggest failing along the line. All these years past that one evening in the chemistry lab, I was waiting to see what would come along. And in the meantime, I was occupying myself, spending my energy on things that didn't matter because right now didn't matter. What was coming down the line mattered. But right now is easy come, easy go. And that was only more exaggerated by the pandemic. A lot of things were let slip that shouldn't have been. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, my professors weren't even doing online lectures. That mindset affected everyone that this was something temporary. So we'll just catch up in a couple months. When they finally started the video lectures, I just kept on waiting. I don't ever want to say about my life, it's too late. But the time keeps passing, and without noticing, you may have gotten to a point where you've been waiting for years, and maybe it's time to stop waiting. Any direction is better than no direction. I say that to my shame because I think even a downwards direction will at least teach you something. And if I had quit medical school that very day in year one, that would have been better than waiting for another 5 years. I think it's fairly common for medical students to want to give up. I read it a lot on the subreddits dedicated to medical students. And whenever someone takes it upon themselves to vent to the internet that they've had enough, that they don't have any passion for what they're doing, or that they're tired of what they're doing, or that they never wanted to do it in the first place, and now they've finally got the courage to say no to their perceived slave drivers, I always think I have to say something because I've been there and I've done that. And I don't want them to wait 5 years. And my answer is never quit. It's not wait and see if things will change, but it's not quit. I think everyone has a need to do something. Everyone who becomes a doctor has a need for something. And that something is far more specific than helping people. Maybe there's a student who wants to become a doctor because he has this need to feel the validation of the people who call him by the title. Or maybe there's a student who needs to become a doctor because she's had health problems within her family and needs to feel in control of this big, uncontrolled suffering that she's experienced. Maybe there's a student who needs to become a doctor because it's a highly secure career and their life has been anything but secure. Maybe there's a student who needs to become a doctor because it's perceived as one of the highest callings as a career, and they were always in competition with their classmates at the top of the rankings and need to continue that feeling to be able to look themselves in the mirror. I need to become a doctor because I need to control what I want. I can't conceive of a life where I follow the whims of that boy looking out the window in year one. I need to be free of the control of feelings that fluctuate from 1 month to the next. I need to be free of the tyranny of myself. And maybe it's because I'm already here. But medicine's pretty tough. None of what I need is specific to medicine. But I need to be able to do something that's tough that I don't want to do and to succeed in it. I need that in my save file. So that's what I need. And I think any medical student, any student of whatever degree you're doing, anyone struggling through something that they don't want to do, can find a need for freedom that isn't quitting, but is overcoming. A need that transcends themselves being the wants and desires of today. And if you can define that need above all things, then you won't want to quit anymore. And you won't be stuck anymore. You won't be waiting anymore. If you're stuck, this is your highest priority.